talk about the camera I've been shooting pretty consistently for the past month. It's a camera I picked up at the beginning of August and have been using it as my main camera pretty much since then. This is the Leica M8.2, the black version. The reason why I got this camera, to put it into some perspective, is because I've been shooting a lot of digital and less film just because it's been so expensive to shoot film. So I've been shooting with Sony A7 II that I'm filming this on, and also Canon 6D. But I felt more and more that I was becoming disconnected from my photography, that these cameras you basically just point it and shoot, and in some cases that's exactly what you want, but in other times you want to, when you shoot film for example, you get kind of a more organic experience where you feel like you're really a part of the photography process. You feel a bit more like, it feels more like an artistic process, like drawing or painting or something. So instead of just pointing and shooting, you have to focus, you choose your settings carefully, you look through the window and you like line up the focus, and everything is a bit more calculated and takes a little bit of time. You have your settings on top, so you don't have to delve into the menus to make your settings. And just the fact that the screen could totally break on this camera and I could keep shooting it and I wouldn't really miss out on any of the experience of shooting. It's really, I don't know, it feels very much like the film Leica that I have, the M4P, except that it shoots to a digital sensor instead of a film. It's pretty amazing how close they've kept the experience of shooting on a film Leica to the digital Leica. But the camera is not without its downsides. This is actually a 10-year-old camera, or almost 10 years old. The M8, the original M8 was released in 2006, and the M8.2 was released in 2008, 2 years later, but uses the exact same sensor. So the technology in this is actually 12 years old. The camera itself is maybe 9 years old. But on the other hand, when it came out, it was almost $6,000 new, and now you can get this camera used for, I got it for about $1,000 on the used market. And this is in Norway, where things are generally more expensive than in the US, so you could probably get it cheaper in the US. So when I started shooting this camera, I picked it up. I was pretty uncertain how I would feel about it. I knew that I wanted a more film-like experience when shooting digital, but I wasn't totally sure how I would like the Leica M8 because, well, I had my doubts about the sensor. 10-year-old sensor, it's only 10 megapixels. It uses a CCD sensor instead of the CMOS type sensor that they have in most cameras these days. So it comes with a bit of downsides. For example, the high ISO performance is like total crap on this camera. It shoots in increments of 160 ISOs. So at 160, it actually is amazing. Everything is super crisp, super sharp. I don't see any traces at all of any sort of noise. 320 is also pretty decent, but then 640 is already getting kind of iffy. And then there's 1250 and 2500, and both those I wouldn't recommend at all. They're pretty much junk. Maybe if you're shooting black and white and you like convert it to some sort of high contrast preset or something, it can look okay, but it's not exactly filmic grain that you get. It's like it's like a 90s webcam grain. It looks like total crap. The thing with the ISO is, again, if you treat it as if it were a film camera, you can just shoot at 160 ISO the whole time. I've pretty much only shot 160 ISO. If it becomes a low light situation, I'll just slap a flash on top, just like I would on a film camera. So it's not such a drawback for me for what I need to use it for. The other thing that's a bit weak about this camera, or I think is kind of irritating, is that the sensor is sensitive to infrared, which means that Sometimes when you're shooting with shiny black fabrics, or maybe like even trees like foliage like this that should be green, sometimes it will come out with a purple or a magenta tint and looks really weird and kind of unnatural. Other than that, it's kind of not that noticeable, but there's a few situations where it's really irritating. You can buy these filters, IR cut filters, that you could go over the lenses and basically completely removes that IR sensitivity. But the problem is there hasn't really been a need for the IR cut filters so much since this camera 10 years ago. And so especially here in Europe and Norway, it's like really difficult to find these IR cut filters. I've been to all the stores in town and none of them have them. I can order them on eBay, but the prices get up to be around $100 for like a crappy used filter. Or I mean, this is for like the good brand ones. There's also like, yeah, no-name brand ones that are okay, but not amazing. But for me, I almost don't really mind. I have splurged and ordered one of the expensive filters. It hasn't arrived yet. But for most of what I've shot so far, I've just shot like this without a filter, and it's almost totally fine. There's only been a couple of images where it's really irritated me, but other than that, it's okay. Another thing that a lot of people complain about these cameras, especially the M8, but also the M8.2, is the shutter sound. And for me, I actually find it to be really nice. It reminds me a bit of shooting an old point and shoot film camera from the 90s or something like that. I'll just let you hear what it sounds like. It's not that loud, really. What everybody mostly complains about is this whirring sound after the click, but it sounds kind of like winding a film. I don't know. I actually rather like the sound of the shutter. I know that the M8, people have complained more about the M8 than the M8.2, so I'm not sure what that one sounds like. So yeah, the camera is actually really great. Shoots super sharp images, even with these Voigtlander lenses that get mixed reviews online. Still incredibly sharp images, as long as you keep it at low ISOs. And the experience of shooting them, I think, is really awesome. It's pretty much exactly the same as shooting like a film camera, just on digital, with a slightly louder shutter sound. One other thing I should mention is it's not full frame. It is a 1.3x crop, so like halfway between full frame and APS-C. Honestly, I haven't even noticed. I know like on paper the specs, but when I'm shooting, I have a 35mm lens and a 50mm lens. I haven't noticed any cropping effect at all. I know it's there, but it's to me it's like minimal enough that I don't care. Actually, it doesn't bother me. So yeah, I think it's a great camera, a lot of fun to shoot with. I would recommend it maybe more for personal work and stuff you're going to be sharing online rather than stuff you're going to be printing or trying to sell as a professional work, mostly because 10 megapixels is a bit weak in this in the current standards, and if you try to get them published in magazines or try to sell it as commercial work, I think you might get some maybe negative feedback about the small resolution size. It's difficult to crop and that type of thing. But other than that, I think it's really great. The body has a really nice solid feel, and I really like walking around with it. I love shooting with it, and it's the cheapest digital M that you can get. And for me, I think it's worth it at this point. I wouldn't have bought it if it was $6,000, but for the price you can get it used now, I recommend it. You can read more about this camera and see some more samples on my blog, criticalfocus.co. That's criticalfocus.co. I have a blog post reviewing this camera with some samples, and check it out.